What's going to happen in Congress? Well, 2 weeks ago, the House Aviation Subcommittee and the full Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure passed a bill that basically does not include user fees. So on the House side, that bill is moving forward. It's gone out from the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee over to the taxing committees, Ways and Means, and they will settle on what the tax. For general aviation, right now the bill looks like it'll be very close to what it was last year, which is about 36 cents for jet fuel and about 24 cents and change for avgas. So a raise for avgas of only about 3 cents a gallon. So we're making some headway there in the House. On the Senate side, what I anticipate seeing from preliminary discussions that we have had, that we do not think that Senator Rockefeller and Senator Dorgan, who are responsible for Commerce and then the Subcommittee on Commerce for Aviation, will go along with a user fee either. We hope that they will take the compromise that was achieved with their tax committees, which is Senator Baucus and Senator Grassley's committee, and to be able to go and settle on roughly that same tax rate for us. Now, what does that do? Those taxes, those increase in taxes for fuel will raise some additional money for the trust fund that is not there now. It holds the airlines harmless, basically keeps their tax level at the way it is right now. Now, it is true that the trust fund revenue that's coming in, and that comes from taxes that are paid not only in fuel for the commercial and general aviation, but also ticket taxes, that trust fund revenue is declining. Why? Less people are flying, the airlines have contracted, so less money is going in there. But think about what would happen if we did implement user fees a couple years ago. And this is the story that we're taking to the Hill. You look at the economic downturn right now, and we've done projections of what would happen had we gone to the user fee proposal, and the amount of money now that the government would have to generate by jacking up the fees at the exact time that they shouldn't be doing that would drive the industry further into this downward cycle. User fees are not at all the way this industry wants to go, because we have to be able to keep the pressure on the federal government to recognize what this industry, and I'm talking the entire industry, the airlines, general aviation, cargo, all together, brings to this economy. And there is another gorilla out there that's looming, and that gorilla is, what are we going to do on environmental legislation? And this is very important. As you saw in the President's joint message to Congress, the President wants to generate about $646 billion over 10 years in some type of emissions regulation. Whether that be his preferred option, the administration's preferred option is an emissions trading scheme or an emissions trading program. There are other options out there that could be pursued, which could be a carbon tax just on fuel burn, just like general aviation is taxed right now. But I think it is probably safe to say that we will see something. So what did we do as associations in Washington? We all got together, and this is in the big tent theory. This is all of us, the airlines, general aviation, everyone together. And we signed a set of principles that we think is a very, very important template by which the committees up in Congress have to work toward. And these committees are new committees that we haven't worked with traditionally. Senator Boxer's committee in the Senate and Chairman Waxman's committee in the House are the ones that are going to be responsible for environmental legislation. But one of the core tenets of these policies that we put forward is it's absolutely critical that any monies collected go back into aviation and doesn't go out in some amorphous pot that's used for deficit reduction or goes out there and can't be accessed by aviation, because we need that money to be able to allow us to get greener. And that's very, very critical, and everyone within our industry needs to be talking about this, because if we're able to capture any dollars that's collected and pump it back into our industry, what's going to happen? We can accelerate next gen. We can accelerate in Europe's CSAR, and this principle is very important for the European emissions trading scheme as well. And it is absolutely known that if we're able to accelerate those modernization programs of air traffic control, that our great controller workforce out there is going to be able to bring aircraft down from altitude very efficiently, keep them up at cruise altitude a longer amount of time. They can pull the power back to idle, And then they absolutely come on a continuous descent type of approach into landing and burn very little fuel and create very little noise. Conversely, on takeoff, they can do continuous ascent to takeoff to cruise altitude, saving a lot of gas instead of the stair-step approach that we normally have right now. That is absolutely critical. Another important piece of this policy document that the industry associations came together and talked about was the absolute importance that we have federal primacy over environmental regulation. Right now, when rules that apply to aviation go out by the FAA, they're applied universally over the entire country. No state can regulate aviation rules, but that premise that we've operated on for a long, long time does not apply to the environment. Think about how dangerous that can be if a certain state comes up with its own environmental additive tax or additive emissions scheme above what the federal government does. That is going to hold in absolute jeopardy a lot of service to smaller towns within the U.S. And we know that the infrastructure that we have built in the U.S. to support aviation, whether it's commercial or general aviation, has been the lifeblood for this economy. So the environmental tenets, there's many of them, but I encourage any of you that are interested in what's happening in the environmental front to go on either the No Plane, No Gain website or the GAMA website and take a look at those principles, because they're very important for our industry to start to talk about. Now let me touch a little bit on Europe. All of us that are in aviation, again, in the big umbrella picture of aviation, knows how important our industry is to commerce around the globe, and knows how important what is happening in Europe is for the men and women that are working so hard here in Wichita. Right now, we are at a unique point in history. We are at a point where EASA, the European Safety Agency, that is a rough equivalent, it's not a direct equivalent to the FAA, but roughly could be equated to it, is at that embryonic stage of rulemaking, where they're talking about virtually every issue that affects aviation, and particularly they're turning their attention to general aviation right now. Now, it is the goal of the aviation associations to try to make sure that the regulation over in Brussels and EASA is located in Cologne, that mirrors very, very closely the regulation that we have here in the U.S. We as manufacturers absolutely do not want to equip an airplane with avionics that can only operate in Europe, or one that can only operate in the U.S. We are in a global industry, and we have to be able to have those aircraft be able to communicate with the ground infrastructure universally. And as we go further and further with Next Gen, our modernization program, and CESAR over in Europe, that becomes all the more important, because very soon we're going to have the capability of being able to talk computer to computer, the computer on the ground, talking with a very sophisticated computer that's embedded into the flight data system within the aircraft to be able to tell it where to go. And the structure of how we control aircraft will change. Not saying that we'll not need controllers out there, because there's always the role of the controller is going to be very, very important, particularly when we get convective weather, which we know we get all around the planet. And we're going to have controllers to be able to sort it out when that comes up. And we also have to have the controllers get together with the pilots to be able to define what that end state is.